6:38 on this Friday morning. Senator Mark Obenshain is with us this morning as the General Assembly, we think, is about to end. Are we on track for this thing to gavel out this weekend?
Who knows, John?
Okay.
We're about to wrap up the business on 99% of the legislation working its way through the General Assembly. The budget, heaven only knows. I guess we'll wait to see whether we see white or black smoke coming out of the chimney of the Vatican.
What's the sticking point now? What are the points of negotiation?
Well, my understanding is right now, the big sticking point is over revenue. How much are we going to have? And how much tax relief are we going to provide to the people of the Commonwealth of Virginia? We have, one camp that believes that the people ought to be able to keep their own money and that make their own decisions about how to spend it. The other who see these surging tax revenues as manna from heaven, that we're just going to gather it all up, and we know better than the taxpayers how to spend it, and we're going to spend it ourselves.
In normal times, I think that that's not a winning argument for Democrats to say we want to keep your money when we're flush with cash. But in this circumstance where gas prices are going up and inflation is so high, are they trying to commit suicide politically? This just doesn't seem very smart to me. Telling the average voter we're going to keep your money at this moment. I don't get that.
Yeah, isn't it crazy? You've got the Democratic activists out there with their lawsuits saying we want a new election this year, and Democrats in the General Assembly saying, yeah, and we want your money too. And President Biden, who's made every possible decision to raise interest rates, raise inflation, raise gas prices, it seems like a disastrous scenario to me, but who am I?
Yeah, what do you think will happen with that? Will there be an extra election this year and then another one next year? That'd be 3 in a row.
Well, it's happened before.
Yeah.
Your father would remember that, but it hasn't happened for a long time. It happened back in the 1980s. I hope it doesn't happen. I don't think it should happen. Back in the 1980s, General Assembly adopted a redistricting plan they knew was unconstitutional, what knew was going to be struck down. This past year, it was because the U.S. Census Bureau was slow and late getting census figures to the map drawers. So, there's no punitive component. So, we'll have to wait and see. It's in the hands of the courts, and that's hard to predict.
Yeah.
So it would be House elections, presumably, not Senate elections.
Not Senate, right. That would pick up the on schedule the next year, yeah.
Yeah, and frankly, if we have House elections this year, my bet is House Republicans pick up another 5 seats.
I think so, too. I think Democrats better be careful what they agitate for because it's not looking good for them. Things can change rapidly, of course, but if it were to happen today, I think people are pretty unhappy with the direction that the Democrat Party is taking the country and some of the things that have transpired at the Capitol. Let me ask you about this parole board situation. So Senator Eben, who was in the House of Delegates, this Northern Virginia guy, says that the House needed to be punished and taught a lesson here about, how they're going to handle gubernatorial appointments. So now, if I'm reading the stories today correctly, there's one member of the parole board. Can the parole board function? Is this some sort of lesson here? I don't get it.
Exactly. It's cutting off your nose to spite your face. The Senate Democrats are committed to release of as many inmates from our state prisons as possible. They've demonstrated that over the past 2.5 years with the parole board scandal. I can't believe, number one, that they want to revive this scandal. I'm delighted that more attention is being focused on the illegal actions of the Northern Parole Board. But on the other hand, You're exactly right. I mean, how in the world are we going to act on parole applications of Virginia's inmates if the Senate Democrats decide we're not going to put anybody on the parole board?
So, I mean, it really is dysfunctional, right? One person, I guess the new chair, that person can't just act unilaterally, can they? I mean, everything.
No, absolutely not. And these are, there are, 3 full-time positions on the parole board. 2 full-time members were kicked off yesterday, and 2 part-time members. The parole board can't act without the members. And these are not like Board of Education positions where these are, part-timers who, come to Richmond once every, 4 to 6 weeks for an afternoon meeting and a bologna sandwich. They are full-time evaluating applications, taking deep dives into, the parole decisions. These are people who quit their jobs. I heard one member of the parole board left a long-time job and has children in college, and it's just mean-spirited, especially when chair of the Privileges Elections Committee stands up and says, "We're doing this to teach the House a lesson." That's pretty childish in my view.
I think it's childish, and honestly, as someone who does care about doing the right thing with the people who are incarcerated, if you've done the time and you haven't gotten in trouble and you are up for parole under our laws, I think you should get the opportunity to make your case for parole. And if Democrats thought they were buying votes by just letting everybody out, now they're about to burn them. So I don't get it unless there's some end run that I just don't see here. It's very odd.
No, it's just pure political retribution. It's Washington comes to Richmond. Yeah. It's the kind of dysfunction we expect to see across the Potomac, not in the city of Richmond.
And real quick before we go, did you see this letter from the superintendents, school superintendents across the state, kind of chiding Governor Youngkin, calling into question the judgments he's made about divisive concepts and diversity, equity, inclusion? I mean, these guys that disconnected that they can't read the room and figure out that perhaps they just lost an election over this. They don't want to get involved in it. I'm puzzled by it.
A, no, I did not see the letter. B, am I surprised about what you've described? Absolutely not. I've been fighting against the educational, what I call the educrat establishment for years. I mean, these guys live in an insular world in which they believe that they know what's best for families and children and that parents ought to butt out. And, talk about somebody who needs to be taught a lesson, not in the raw political sense that we saw yesterday, but these folks just don't get it. Parents want to be involved in the education of their children, and they don't want their children brainwashed and taught what to think. They want to be taught. They want them to be taught how to think. This is crazy.
Yeah. Well, take a look at that because I think it's going to send your blood pressure boiling today because I just couldn't believe it, especially coming off of the election that we just had in November. It's about as tone deaf as anything I've ever seen. So, listen, I appreciate you joining us so many times over the past several weeks while the General Assembly has been in session here in Richmond. Senator Mark Obenshain, I hope we'll talk again. Thank you.
Good to be with you. Thanks.
6:47 on this Friday morning. We'll come back.